Imagine you are standing in a village, holding a chicken in your hands. Not far away, another person is carrying a sack filled with grain. You need the grain, but he has no interest in your chicken. This is the kind of situation that many economics books mention only briefly. They describe it as an inefficient way to trade. They call it primitive, treating it as nothing more than an early stage before money solved the problem. But stop for a moment and picture the situation as if you were really there. The chicken in your hands is alive. It cannot be stored forever. The grain he carries can feed a family for days or even weeks. Right now, the only thing standing between you and hunger is one simple fact. Today, he does not want what you have to offer. At first, this may not seem like a story about money. Instead, it is a story about failure. A problem that appeared again and again throughout human history. A problem so common and so deeply built into everyday life that it eventually pushed our species to create something completely new. Something that does not exist anywhere else in nature. No wolves use it. No bees depend on it. No coral reefs have ever needed it. Across more than 4 billion years of life on Earth, only one species has ever invented such a thing. We call it money. Most people think they already know why money was created. But beneath that simple question lies a much more surprising story. The explanation most of us learn is straightforward. Long ago, people traded goods directly with one another. Someone exchanged fish for bread. Another person traded bread for tools. Someone else swapped tools for clothing. As communities grew larger, these exchanges became more difficult. Sometimes one person wanted what another had, but the feeling was not shared. Just like the man with the grain had no use for your chicken. According to the familiar story, people eventually solved this problem by choosing an object that everyone would accept. Instead of searching for someone who wanted exactly what they were offering, people could exchange their goods for this shared object and later use it to buy whatever they needed. That object became money. For more than 2 centuries, this explanation has appeared in economics textbooks around the world. It is simple. It is logical. Looking back, it seems like the obvious path that human history must have followed. But modern research in anthropology tells a different story. When anthropologists began searching for real societies that lived exactly this way, communities where everyday life depended entirely on people swapping one item directly for another, they expected to find many examples. Instead, they found almost none. They searched historical records. They studied reports from explorers. They spent decades observing communities that had never used coins or paper currency. Yet they struggled to find a single society built entirely on everyday barter. One anthropologist from Cambridge University devoted much of her career to this question. After years of research, she concluded that no clear example of a pure barter economy had ever been properly documented anywhere in the world. If that conclusion is correct, then one of the most famous stories about the origin of money may never have been true in the way we usually imagine it. So if people were not regularly trading fish for bread before money existed, what were they actually doing? The answer is surprisingly simple. They remembered. Not with written records. Not with numbers. Not with account books. They relied on memory. On relationships. On the quiet understanding that favors created obligations and that those obligations did not need to be settled immediately. Someone might owe another person help for months, years, or even longer. And that was perfectly acceptable. For most of human history, people lived in small communities where everyone knew one another personally. In those close-knit groups, there was usually no need to complete every exchange on the spot. A hunter shared meat after a successful hunt. He trusted that one day, when he needed help, someone else would return the kindness. Perhaps not the same person. Perhaps not in exactly the same way. But eventually, the balance would be restored. There was no argument over chickens or grain. There was no careful bargaining over equal value. Instead, there was something much older than money. A shared understanding. A feeling that people looked after one another. That if you helped your community today, your community would help you when your own time of need arrived. This single idea changes the entire question. If money was not invented simply to solve the inconvenience of barter, then another force must have pushed humans to create it. And that force may have had far more to do with psychology, trust, and human relationships than with trade itself. Part 2. The limits of human memory. Now imagine a small village. Perhaps 40 people live there. Maybe 60. Everyone knows everyone else. Each person remembers who helped rebuild a neighbor's home after a storm. They remember who shared food during a difficult winter. They remember who offered support when someone was sick, and who still owes a favor that has never been spoken about again. Nothing is written down. No records exist. Yet somehow everyone keeps track. For small communities like this, the system works remarkably well. Memory becomes the village's accounting system. Trust becomes its currency. People do not need coins or banknotes because they already know who has earned their trust and who has not. But this way of living has one serious limitation. Human memory is powerful, but it is not unlimited. Researchers believe that most people can comfortably maintain stable social relationships with around 150 individuals. Within a group of that size, it is still possible to remember faces, shared experiences, favors, promises, and old disagreements. Beyond that point, things begin to change. Names become harder to remember. Stories become confused. People forget who helped whom. Old obligations disappear from memory. The invisible system that once held the community together slowly begins to fail. At some point in early human history, villages continued to grow. Small communities became larger settlements. More strangers arrived. Families who had never met before suddenly found themselves living side by side. These newcomers had never shared meals with you. They had never repaired your home. You had never hunted together. There was no long history of trust connecting you. In many cases, you might meet someone only once before they disappeared from your life forever. This created an entirely new challenge. The real question was no longer, how can we exchange goods more easily? The deeper question became far more important. How can two complete strangers cooperate when neither owes anything to the other? How can they trust each other without years of shared experience? This is where the story of money becomes much more interesting. Money was never simply about making trade faster or more convenient. It solved a much bigger problem. It replaced something that could no longer keep up. For thousands of years, trust had been enough. But trust depended on personal relationships. Personal relationships depended on memory. And memory could only stretch so far. As human societies expanded beyond the limits of what people could personally remember, the old system stopped working. A new solution became necessary. People needed something that allowed strangers to cooperate without first becoming friends. They needed a system that worked even when two people had never met before and would never meet again. That solution was money. Money did not appear because humans suddenly wanted a better way to buy and sell. It appeared because human communities became too large for memory alone to support. In a small village, your reputation was enough. Everyone knew who you were. Everyone remembered your actions. But in a growing town filled with unfamiliar faces, reputation could no longer travel fast enough. Something else had to take its place. Money became that replacement. It allowed trust to exist between people who shared no history together. It created a way for complete strangers to exchange goods, services, and labor without relying on personal relationships. In many ways, money was not invented to replace barter. It was invented to replace memory. It became a new form of trust, one that did not depend on knowing another person's name, family, or past. That simple change transformed human society. For the first time, people could cooperate on a scale that had never been possible before. Communities could continue growing. Trade could spread across greater distances. Cities could expand. Civilizations could emerge. Not because humans trusted each other more than before, but because they had created something that allowed cooperation even when trust alone was no longer enough. Part 3. The stone that never needed to move. Far out in the western Pacific Ocean lies a small island called Yap. For hundreds of years, the people living there used a form of money unlike almost anything the modern world would recognize. Their currency was made of stone. Not small stones that could fit into a pocket, but enormous circular limestone discs with a hole carved through the center. Some measured more than 2 meters across. Some weighed nearly 2,000 kilograms. Moving one of these stones was an enormous challenge. What makes them even more remarkable is that they were not created on Yap itself. The limestone came from the island of Palau, located more than 300 miles away across open ocean. To bring these stones home, people traveled by large outrigger canoes. The journey was long and dangerous. Storms could appear without warning. Boats could sink. Some of the men making the voyage never returned. Yet these risks were not seen as unfortunate accidents that reduced the stone's value. In fact, they often increased it. A stone that required greater effort, greater danger, or greater sacrifice to obtain was considered more valuable than one that had been easier to bring back. Think about what that means. The difficulty of the journey became part of the currency itself. The story behind the object mattered just as much as the object. But the most surprising part comes after the stones reached the island. Many of them were so large that they were never moved again. They remained exactly where they had been placed. Some stayed in the same location for decades. Others remained there for generations. Yet ownership of those stones continued to change. How is that possible? The answer is surprisingly simple. The people of Yap did not need to physically move the stone to transfer its value. Instead, the community gathered together. A marriage might take place. A family might repay an important debt. Two groups might settle a long-standing disagreement. During these public events, everyone witnessed the agreement. Everyone understood that the ownership of a particular stone had changed. The stone stayed exactly where it was. Only the shared understanding of who owned it changed. Nothing physical needed to move. The real value had never existed inside the stone itself. It existed inside the minds of the people who accepted the agreement. There is another famous story connected to these stones. According to a well-known account, one particularly valuable stone sank into the ocean while it was being transported back to Yap. The people carrying it survived and returned home. They explained what had happened. The entire community accepted their story. Even though the stone was now lying at the bottom of the sea and no one could ever see or touch it again, it was still recognized as valuable property. People continued treating it as real wealth. Its ownership could still change through agreement. Its value remained intact because everyone believed the stone existed and accepted who owned it. No one needed to recover it. No one needed to prove it was still there. The shared belief of the community was enough. At first, this story sounds like an unusual tradition from a distant island. But it reveals something much deeper about money itself. It shows that money has never depended only on physical objects. Its true power comes from collective belief. Even the economist who won the Nobel Prize pointed out an interesting comparison. He observed that the giant stones of Yap were not so different from the gold reserves stored by modern governments. Huge amounts of gold often remain locked inside secure vaults for years. Ownership changes through official records and agreements. Yet the gold itself may never leave the building. The stones of Yap rested in open fields. Modern gold sits behind thick steel doors beneath banks. The surroundings are different. The technology is different. But the underlying idea is remarkably similar. The object remains in one place while people simply agree that ownership has changed. This comparison forces us to rethink what money really is. Whether it is a giant stone, a bar of gold, a paper banknote, or a digital number inside a computer, its value does not come from the material alone. Its value comes from a shared agreement. It exists because people choose to believe in it together. And that realization leads to an uncomfortable truth. Anything built on shared belief can survive only as long as people continue believing. The object matters. But the agreement matters far more. Part 4. When belief disappears. During the Second World War, something remarkable happened inside prisoner-of-war camps. Economists would later study these camps because they revealed an important truth about how money can appear almost anywhere. Inside the camps, official money had almost no purpose. There were no normal shops. There were no banks. Government currency could not buy the things people needed. But another item quickly began serving a very different role. Cigarettes. Large numbers of cigarettes arrived in relief packages sent by the Red Cross. At first, they were simply something people smoked. Soon, they became much more than that. People began using them to measure value. A chocolate bar could be exchanged for a certain number of cigarettes. A service or favor also had its own price. Before long, an entire economy had formed inside the camp. Cigarettes had become the common standard that everyone understood. Even prisoners who had never smoked started collecting them. They did not keep them to smoke later. They kept them because they knew everyone else accepted them as valuable. In a place without banks, governments, or legal contracts, cigarettes became the one thing people trusted during every exchange. What makes this story so fascinating is how quickly it happened. Within only a few weeks, complete strangers living together under extraordinary circumstances had created a working economic system. No government designed it. No laws forced people to accept it. The system grew naturally because everyone needed a shared way to exchange goods. This raises an important question. If money can appear so quickly whenever people need a common system of exchange, what does that say about the money we use every day? Throughout history, every form of money has faced the same hidden test. What happens when people stop believing in it? A coin has value only while people agree that it does. Without that agreement, it becomes nothing more than a piece of metal. A paper banknote is useful only because society accepts it. Without that shared belief, it is simply printed paper. The numbers displayed in a bank account seem valuable because everyone agrees they represent something real. If that confidence disappears, they become nothing more than digits on a screen. This is why events like hyperinflation are so devastating. They are not simply financial problems. They are moments when millions of people lose confidence at the same time. Money itself has not physically changed. The paper looks the same. The coins weigh the same. The numbers remain visible. But the shared belief supporting their value suddenly begins to collapse. History has shown heartbreaking examples. People have pushed wheelbarrows filled with banknotes that were worth less than the wheelbarrow carrying them. Families have watched a lifetime of savings lose nearly all their purchasing power in a matter of months. The paper itself did not change overnight. What disappeared was trust. Many people believe that money is ultimately supported by gold, governments, or laws. Those things certainly play an important role. But beneath them lies something even more fundamental. Money works because people collectively agree that it works. That shared belief is the foundation supporting every coin, every banknote, every credit card payment, and every digital balance displayed on a screen. Our modern economies depend on billions of people continuing to accept the same invisible agreement every single day. The unsettling truth is this. Civilization itself rests upon a belief that most people rarely stop to question. As long as that belief remains strong, money continues to function. But if enough people lose confidence at the same time, even the strongest currency can begin to lose the very thing that gave it value in the first place. Not because the material changed, but because the agreement behind it did. Part 5. The system we created when trust was no longer enough. Now step back and look at the bigger picture. Go back as far as human history allows. For hundreds of thousands of years, people lived in small groups where everyone knew one another personally. Life depended on relationships. Every favor was remembered. Every act of kindness created an obligation. Every promise became part of a shared memory that helped hold the community together. In that world, money was unnecessary. People did not rely on coins or banknotes. They relied on each other. Trust was enough. Memory was enough. Relationships were enough. Money did not suddenly appear because humans made a brilliant invention overnight. Instead, it emerged because the old way of living could no longer support a growing world. As communities expanded, people became too numerous and too widely scattered to know everyone personally. The close bonds that once connected every member of a village slowly became impossible to maintain. Something new was needed. Money became that solution. At its heart, money is a tool that allows two strangers to cooperate without sharing a personal relationship. It creates a bridge between people who may never meet again. Think about a simple coin. It allows one stranger to trust another without knowing anything about that person's life. No family history. No reputation built over years. No shared memories. only a shared belief that the coin will be accepted by someone else tomorrow. A paper banknote works in exactly the same way. It allows trust to travel across cities, countries, and even continents. A person can accept payment from someone they have never met, confident that countless other strangers will also recognize its value. Today, the process has become even more invisible. Most of our money exists only as numbers stored inside computers. Those numbers allow billions of people to work together every day. People who speak different languages. People living on opposite sides of the world. People who will never meet, never shake hands, and never truly know one another. Yet they continue exchanging goods, services, and ideas as if they belong to one enormous community. Money makes this possible.